Welcome to another edition of Meet the Visionaries podcast, sponsored by the MIT Center for Real Estate. In this episode, Jason Ng, a current Master of Science in Real Estate Development student, speaks with Mr. Mark Grinis, an Ernst Young global real estate, hospitality, and construction leader. In this discussion, Mark will highlight the ever-changing real estate, hospitality, and construction sector and how EY fits into it all. So, without further delay, Jason, Mark, take it away.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to our podcast at the MIT Center for Real Estate. My name is Jason Ng, and I am a second-year student in the Dual Masters of City Planning and Real Estate Development program. In my first year at MIT, I got an incredible opportunity to work at Ernst Young, aka EY, during our independent activities period. There, I got to meet some great folks across EY's real estate, hospitality, and construction sector, including the group's America's leader, Mark Grinis. Mark is involved in managing EY's $1.2 billion real estate business, which encompasses over 17,000 professionals worldwide. He served in EY leadership positions across private equity, mergers and acquisitions, restructuring, and transactions, among many others. He's also led the digital transformation initiatives in real estate and has been a featured guest on various news outlets, including Bloomberg, CNBC, and Fox, among others. Mark is a licensed CPA and holds a bachelor from Claremont McKenna College. Today, we'll be talking to Mark about how his career evolved as a leader and what's on his mind in the world of commercial real estate. Welcome to the show, Mark.
Jason, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here today.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. So just to get started, for our listeners' background, could you tell us more about EY's real estate, hospitality, and construction sector and kind of how it relates to the other parts of EY's business?
Yeah, you think about a professional service firm like ours, we have over 400,000 people around the world. And so we really, you think about GDP, we probably service every single sector throughout the entire economy, whether it's in our healthcare, whether it's in our technology department, whether it's in our metals and mining, or in real estate. And each one has a unique role in servicing the various multinationals and Fortune 500 companies. For real estate, our sector really consists of our hospitality business, our home builder business, our real estate funds business, our REIT business, the private and public side of the capital markets on that whole real estate ownership. Our engineering and construction. So if you kind of think about it, we think of real estate as kind of, dirt to disposition. What is ultimately, from a design perspective, from a build perspective, from an ownership perspective, and then a disposition. And even a part of it, we're closely linked as well with financial services, which is obviously the finance side of real estate. So you put that all together, and that is really how we look at real estate within EY.
Great, thank you for that. And could you tell us a little bit more about you and your journey, from studying economics and accounting at Claremont McKenna through kind of your different roles as a leader at EY? So how did you get to where you are now?
I would probably have to even go back. I would go back even further. So I was fixing up apartments in downtown Los Angeles as a way of making some money, and really recognize that I really enjoyed the tangible, the physical aspects of being involved in real estate. Real estate is it's one of the biggest asset classes. It's where we all live and eat and sleep and shop and have recreation. And just my early experiences on working on projects, I liked the creative side of it. I liked the design part of it. I liked how it connected with people. And so I got into that. And then I realized, though, that I was early in my career, we were in a recession. I realized that I needed to also at the same time get a job. So I made certain I got an accounting degree, because I knew if you had an accounting degree, you could always get a job. And then so I focused on accounting and real estate. And together, my first job was with Kenneth Leventhal out of LA. And it was an accounting firm that just focused it on just real estate. And so it did exactly what I wanted to do. That company was bought by EY in 1995 when EY said, we really want a strong and powerful real estate sector within EY, and really have taken that time throughout my career. I was given the opportunity to set up our Southeast Asia practice more broadly, and I was based out of Japan. So really worked that entire region, and really setting up real estate at a real unique time in the credit crisis that was going on in Asia at the time. And then I had the opportunity to come back to New York and lead our real estate private equity business for the firm. So have had opportunities to not only capitalize on really unique opportunities globally, and have leadership challenges to do that, and that ultimately took me to the position here to lead real estate for the firm.
Wow, that's really cool. It's great to hear about your background. I'm actually quite curious about some of these global opportunities that you got throughout your career, and how would you say that's like kind of shaped your outlook towards real estate? Like, how have you been seeing different trends or concepts like playing out on a global stage, and how does that influence how you lead today?
As long as there are no New Yorkers on this podcast, I'm going to make a statement that my brethren in New York, I say, guys, there is life outside New York, because they think that's the only place on earth. But the location kind of narrative it's so true, right? I mean, in order to really to be able to an expert in the office market in Manhattan, you've got to have really acute skills to really understand boulevards and streets and understand how to go anywhere else, in Austin, in Atlanta. The importance of local on the ground skills is so important. But if you think of what's kind of happening right now, it's such a fascinating time as we've got these transformational changes of digital transformation, of e-commerce, of distribution, of data centers, of hyperscalers. You kind of put all of this global trends that's happening, and it's happening all around the world, and it's creating a common real estate need. And I refer to it a bit as an app, in the sense that you should be able to look at the kind of fundamentals that are taking place within a country, where they are in their path of development, and really identify opportunities of what property types can be built and driven globally. So I think local expertise is certainly important, but I think right now the most fascinating thing is to really have a global perspective, and really, capital's global. Real estate firms are getting larger and larger. Look at the private equity, these mega investment platforms. I think it's really important to be able to have a global perspective.
Absolutely. Right. And a lot of this globalization of real estate is as a result of technology, and of that digital transformation, as you say. Could you talk a little bit more about EY's work with digital transformation initiatives? I know that's kind of a specialty of yours. Kind of what specific technologies or innovations are you looking at that drive this transformation?
Yeah, look, I think, I see it as a lot of different phases. We clearly were, deep into the prop tech, looking at different ways that we can bring technology, whether it's to optimize operations, to optimize back offices, to be able to manage and monitor portfolios, to then we kind of, we obviously moved heavily into an ESG type strategy. What can we get from technology that'll help us manage, monitor, report out? And clearly, I think we're in an AI phase today, where, what exactly are going to be the roles, the disruptive characteristics of AI that can really transform real estate. At EY, we've invested $1.4 billion into AI and trying to build platforms for simplistic purposes, a chat GPT, but something that's applicable in the skills and the services that we deliver to our clients. How can we deliver faster, more efficient, more insightful points of view of clients by leveraging, this mass amount of information that we have as we provide, services and insights to clients around the world. And I think that is I think it's in early stages, but boy, it's a fascinating time right now and a highly disruptive time. But I think that's what makes it all more exciting. So I kind of see this continuum of the prop tech days, and really it's kind of merging into a bit of an AI era, if you will, and certainly an exciting time.
Definitely. Could you perhaps provide a specific example of some of the work that you guys have been doing around AI or technological initiatives that you see as really promising and exciting that you've gotten involved with?
Yeah, I will. So, when you and this is, I think this is important. The one thing we learned about prop tech was, you had this idea that prop tech could be something that, well, we just have one master thing and it would just solve everything. And the reality is, the needs of an apartment owner, the needs of a hospitality owner, the needs of an office building owner, they all have different characteristics, and not necessarily what's valuable or benefit from an efficient way to sign and execute leases, or an efficient way to get property management to come and empower the tenant to be able to navigate their own service and repair process. All of that can be platform based, can give power to the user, improve the user experience, but it's kind of a real estate specific thing. That doesn't necessarily, if I'm in a hotel, I'm not necessarily calling to figure out how to fix my hot water heater. So that app isn't necessarily applicable. And I think the same thing, AI is the same. It amasses a lot of information, but ultimately the solutions are going to be very specific. One example that we took on was my favorite topic, how we're using office space. And with remote work, and I know, Jason, you worked on a project with us in analyzing it. And, the question came up of, well, if we're all addressing real estate at different times and coming in, we're flexing flexibility, we're using that, but if the experience in office is not dynamic, it doesn't accomplish what we expect from the role of the office, then we're really under optimizing in many ways. So I said, how do we come up with a solution for that, of hundreds of thousands of people addressing office space at any given time, different sectors, different service lines, different functions, tax, audit, consulting. How do we get them so that when they sign in, they don't just get assigned to floor 13, cube 4B25C, right? And the rest of the colleagues are somewhere else. How do we take massive amounts of data, what people are working on, what their areas of expertise, what their levels are, what they're doing right now, and group them, inform them of their colleagues on where they are, where they're sitting, what time they're going to be there, so that the office experience is dynamic and they're informed as users of who's there. I think that's incredibly important. That's one project to demonstrate that how we're using AI to really take that mass amount of data and make it really informative in a real-time basis.
I see. So do you see like EY's role in producing this kind of workplace transformation as connecting companies with the technological partners in order to make these workflows happen more efficiently and effectively?
I do, and we have alliances with all of the major, not all of them, but a vast majority of the big tech platforms on how we can kind of collaborate on different ways we can work together and bring solutions to clients. So we really see it as we have a great understanding of operations and how companies work and their finances in this, and our technology partners can be great infrastructure providers, and together we can provide great solutions to companies, just like the one I shared with you. So I think that's one of 1,000 different examples of where AI will benefit companies going forward.
Absolutely. Let's stay on this topic of the future of work, because I think there's a lot to dig into here. As you mentioned, we had worked together and with Katie Miller on a piece on the future of Class B and C office and kind of the challenges associated with office to residential conversions. I wanted to ask you, how you took some of the findings and kind of what's your take on this ever hot and evolving topic as far as adaptive reuse goes.
It's such a interesting, you think about 3 years ago, and nothing really changed that much technologically. Clearly with Zoom and Teams and other things, we're quick to respond, but the platforms exist. The ability to telecommute existed. But what changed? A period of time where we turned the lights off and worked differently and discovered value of being able to have flexibility, but also some of the pitfalls of having too much flexibility or not enough collaborative time together, where cultures and learning and education were challenged. So we fast forward, you bring us back together, and we just came out with our workplace index. It was our 3rd year. When you and I were working together, I said, wouldn't it be interesting on a same store basis to kind of compare the changes of how this thing is evolving, and so we could figure out by sector, by how companies are reacting and what's working and what's not working. What's fascinating is, right, when we started it was nobody's in the office. And then pandemic was over, our second survey, and it was like everyone's trying to rush back. And our most recent survey that we just came out with, it showed a pullback, which basically said most in-office workers are comfortable with 2 to 3 days a week as a steady state, where they think their organizations can be flexible and be responsive to the needs of the employee, but also be responsible to the organization. So that is transformative. And a lot of those findings, I think the other findings that we found in our report is like the idea that I'm working 5 days a week remotely. I think most organizations found that doesn't work. There's some, but generally speaking, no. The 5-day-a-week work week, many companies are kind of pushing that hard. If you really look at the average in the middle, it's that 2 to 3 days. That's a transformative. That disrupts real estate tremendously. That'll affect the real estate stock. That's what's now driving cities to very much focus on their urbanization strategy. There's nothing worse than having an empty, vacant office building or low attendance or the retail that's suffering from the decrease in remote work. So there's a whole cities angle that has to be focused on. We've got a great strategic partner with John Hope Bryan on working together on how we can address the needs of city centers. We then focus very much on transformation and how do you change, repurpose. We've done a number of studies for cities on looking at certain buildings and saying, how do you incentivize? Is it tax incentives? Is it different ways of abatements and things to motivate transformation? Not every building can be converted. You got a big building, you got a gigantic core, don't have the window space, complicated. And so it's a very bespoke, it's a very real estate solution. It takes creativity, insight, but boy, there's some fascinating projects going on. And even ones that are working on one that it's very complicated. It has a big core, but they're really figuring out an atrium strategy on how to create that interior light and how to address it. So I am confident that our industry is fantastic at finding solutions to problems, and will rebalance the office market, and it will stabilize in the not too distant future.
I see. Yeah, I think that some of what you're talking about is this, real need to collaborate between the public and private sectors. I'm curious, what has the reactions been like? What has the response been like from your public and private sector clients um, due to this work and this research that's coming out that you've been able to provide insights on?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think a lot of public sectors are very focused in on low income housing, challenging. I mean, we have a severe housing shortage, and it's expensive, and you kind of put all that together. That's a real challenge for major urban centers. New York, San Francisco, Atlanta, a lot of them are very focused in on urban revitalization, housing, a lot, so those are, priority 1, 2, and 3. And I think the real estate industry is looking at, we've got a bit of a supply and demand imbalance, right? Because we've been through a very powerful development cycle. Now you've had a disruptive event that's happened to the office market. So it's creating a highest and best use of certain properties that can be converted. Now, the basis has got to be right. We came off of a period where interest rates were so low, values were $1,000 a square foot for an office building. A lot of these things have to get closer, down into the $200, $300, $400, $500 a square foot to make sense for all that CapEx expense. Not all necessarily all the capital structures and all that transformation has happened where prices are where they need to be, but it's happening, and it's happening real time. So I just think this is going to be, I mean, this happened to New York. I'm going to say it was in the 90s where they really went through a major initiative for downtown to convert lots of the properties down there into residential. And it happened over a number of years. I think this is the same kind of situation, and it's underway.
Yeah. Could you talk a little bit about how you think that EY has a specific angle that, developers, architects, public officials might not be thinking about? How is EY going to provide kind of a strategic insight or provide strategic initiative direction around this issue?
Look, it's right in our sweet spot of finance and financing modeling and projections, right? In order, have a low income housing element that is 50%, it's possible that project won't work. If it's 15% with some tax abatements, with some other elements to it, all of the elements that come together of how to finance it, how to get the economics, how to get the right mix of what demand will be for that project come together. That's a whole exercise in feasibility. And finance. That's really kind of our sweet spot as a firm. And so we're helping lots of different companies in that area go through and look at possible scenarios and what might work.
Great. Thank you for that response. Not to pivot a little bit, I wanted to talk about some of the work that you all have been doing around decarbonization and environmental initiatives. I know that there's been a great collaboration between the MIT Center for Real Estate and EY's real estate hospitality construction sector. Could you share some of those insights that you've been thinking about as far as decarbonization, electrification, or other environmental initiatives EY's been working on?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably two-pronged, right? There's a whole regulatory side. What are regulatory laws? What regulatory reporting that's being required? What are cities requiring? In New York, 97, those kind of different things that are happening at a at a governmental type level. And then there's just really an understanding at a property level. What are the scope 1, 2, and 3 assets? What do I control? I just recently had a 60-page survey on really understanding, what parts can the development community address? What do developers, construction, management firms, they all play different roles but most of it is, first thing is you've got to really be able to benchmark. You've got to level set on what are your existing carbon emissions, what do you control, what's within your control, and how can you transform it? I know with MIT, we did a very interesting piece in analyzing the electrification of buildings and looking at what is really the mechanical process of changing it, and how do where do you change it, and what are the effects of it. I'm working with a client right now who's doing a really dramatic project on a geothermal basis on how they're tapping the heating and cooling effects that are in the earth, and how that can ultimately impact the conditions within the building. I mean, so there's all kinds of different projects that are going on right now that are allowing us to first understand what our emissions are, and then really focusing in on where we can reduce them. And I'll even maybe add to that, even on a UI's perspective, we now are, we're a professional service firm. Our biggest carbon emissions is our flying. So we're after that. We have a very firm net zero strategy, and looking at it. For us, understanding our travel spend. I have my dashboard I look at. The trip that I'm going to take will tell me how much carbon I'm going to be responsible for. And is there different ways to do it? For local trips, we get notified. Understand you're going to fly to Boston for an hour, the train, and it goes at this time, and here's how much less carbon impact. It's information that allows you to make, constructive choices. Doesn't mean, everything stops, but where we can identify ways of being more efficient. And that's what we're doing as a firm. We are deeply embedded in our culture to drive responsibility, and have a very focused ESG strategy.
And I really like how you kind of emphasize that it's about information, about data, but also how we use that data to make a better world and make for a better society. And I think that really drives home a lot of what you're talking about. So I appreciate that. So aside from the environmental side of ESG, have you all been unpacking kind of the social or governance sides of ESG reporting and best practices? Can you share anything with our audience today?
Yeah, look, I think one of the areas, one of the areas that we focus in on is obviously in contracts. We're doing it as a firm. All of the vendors that we use. How can we better identify vendors that really drive a social aspect of our contracting? Super important. But what we provide for clients is on like mergers and acquisitions. A lot of our big clients, they take in hundreds of different companies, and they have all kinds of complex vendor constructs. What we do on the social side is we're able to really identify areas of those companies that they're acquiring, and to be able to look at kind of the social strategy that they might want to employ on those companies that are acquiring. How do they get more vendor diversification? How can they drive it? What do they need to do? So there's different areas there that in M&A and other places where kind of the social aspect has, I think, what I view as great opportunity.
Yeah, that's great. We're starting to come up towards the end of our podcast, but before that, I wanted to, ask, because a lot of our audience will consist of students and aspiring career professionals. Could you talk more about, how do you approach, professional leadership, and how would you give advice to any students or aspiring professionals looking to enter the real estate industry?
Yeah, look, it's when you lead 17,000 people, it really, leadership skills are just so important today. In how you're always going to be working in some form of teams, some form of projects, and to be able to lead and guide with a kind of a North Star vision of where do we want to take this project? How do we get everyone to collaborate and find the best skills of each individual and bring it together in a project team to drive for better outcomes? That is key. If you can get 100 people working productively versus just one taking care of what their own stuff, you really need to think about how to drive overall productive and outcome driven base with great collaboration. So I think those skills are always important in any organization, but I can say in a professional service firm, it's paramount. I think in the real estate industry, look, it's look around, look at our city centers, look at our urban centers, look at some of the new projects that we're building. We are building sites that really understand how people want to live and work and be together and collaborate and be in urban centers. And these are just incredible projects. And so we have digital technology that can design. Going back to an AI conversation, I saw one that you can literally tell the AI, we'd like to build something here, and this is what we would want it to look like. And the AI can quickly render a vision of that. We have such an exciting time to be able to be creative and to make lives better. And so I think the real estate industry is poised for a golden year of really aspirational developments and projects.
It certainly is an exciting time. And when you mentioned some of the rendering capabilities of AI, we've been using that a lot in our own studios at MIT on some of my project teams. Before we end this, do you have any closing remarks for our audience?
Well, first of all, please reach out to EY. We want your talents. We want your expertise. We'd love to selfishly have you, all of you that are aspiring in the real estate industry, to come meet with us. But more broadly, I think by being such a major asset class and seeing such a big part of society, it's a really rewarding field to be into. And as you look across the globe, as many places around the world are really embracing a lot of change, and it will be a global business, and I think that'll create an opportunity to really have unique and dynamic experiences, just as I did in going to Japan and Asia, and New York and California, and working across. It's going to become even more interesting to be a professional in real estate. So a great place to start your career.
Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today, Mark.
Great. Thanks,
Jason. So you heard it here, folks. And to our listening audience, thank you for joining us. Hope you tune in next time.
Fascinating conversation. Thanks to our listeners for tuning into another edition of Meet the Visionaries podcast. And please remember to stay tuned for future episodes by subscribing to our podcast or follow us on social media by visiting cre.mit.edu to learn more. Until next time, take care, listeners.